He was just a struggling, single dad trying to keep his daughter fed and his dignity intact. She was a billionaire on her way to another high-stakes meeting until a runaway truck changed both their lives forever. What began as a split-second act of courage soon unraveled into something neither of them could have seen coming. But what if one quiet act of kindness could rewrite everything? Before we begin, if you love stories that stir the heart and celebrate the power of second chances, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Every week we bring you original stories full of hope, healing, and the kind of love that stays with you long after the credits roll. Now let's begin. Struggling single dad saved a billionaire. From a runaway truck. She fell in love with him instantly. It was supposed to be just another Thursday morning. Jake Carter zipped up his worn-out hoodie and laced his steel-toed boots with one hand, the other holding a half-packed lunchbox. His 8-year-old daughter Lily sat at the kitchen table munching on dry cereal, her feet dangling off the chair. "Got your homework?" Jake asked, glancing at the clock. 7:43 a.m. "Yup. Permission slip in my bag." "Toothbrush." Lily gave him a wide grin full of foam and pointed at her mouth. Jake chuckled. She was the one good thing he knew he hadn't messed up. By 8:01 a.m., they were walking hand in hand down the East Village sidewalk. Jake's old pickup was in the shop again, so he was on foot. They passed a dozen strangers, none of whom gave them more than a glance. That was fine by Jake. He liked blending in. The morning air was crisp, the city already buzzing. Street vendors shouted about fresh bagels. Delivery bikes wove dangerously between lanes. Taxi horns played a discordant urban symphony. Then came the sound that didn't belong. A violent crash echoed from around the corner. Metal on metal. Jake's head whipped toward it, instinct tightening his gut. Then he saw it. A garbage truck, massive unmanned, was barreling down the incline of East 9th, its driver's side door flapping open like a wounded wing. People screamed. Cars skidded. And standing right in the path of destruction, oblivious to the chaos behind her, was a woman in a sharp white coat heels, clicking confidently on the pavement. Jake didn't think. "Lily, stay here," he barked, already running. He tore across the crosswalk, dodging a frozen cab and a fallen cyclist. The woman was just a few feet away from death. She turned, finally hearing the screams, just as Jake slammed into her from the side, wrapping his arms around her waist and launching them both out of harm's way. The truck roared past them. A split second later, its tires screeching, colliding with a lamppost that bent and groaned before crashing to the concrete with a deafening crack. Silence followed. Jake blinked, breathless, the woman trembling beneath him. Her eyes ice blue wide with shock locked onto his. Her dark hair spilled around her face like a fallen halo. "You okay, Jake?" asked, his voice rough, low. He gently unwrapped his arms and helped her sit up. She stared at him, her lips parted in disbelief. You saved my life." He stood, brushing debris off his jeans. "Lucky timing. You should probably sit down. That truck I know what it almost did." She rose to her feet with the posture of someone used to commanding rooms, not sidewalks. People were crowding now, someone filming with a phone, others calling emergency services. Lily appeared at Jake's side, her eyes wide. Daddy Jake knelt and pulled her in for a hug. "I told you to stay, didn't I? I just when I saw the truck." Her little voice quivered. "You could have died," he smiled softly. "But I didn't." The woman was still staring. Jake turned to her. "You should let the EMTs check you out. Shock can sneak up on you." "You're hurt," she said instead, pointing to the blood trailing from a gash on his forearm. Jake looked down as if just noticing. "It's nothing." A man in a suit pushed forward through the crowd, breathless. "Miss Monroe." "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," she answered, distracted. Her eyes never left Jake. Thanks to him. Jake froze. "Miss Monroe." Not just any woman, Alexis Monroe, CEO of Monroe Media Group, billionaire, face of half the billboards in Manhattan. The woman he just tackled to the ground like a linebacker. Jake swallowed. "I didn't know who you were. Sorry if I hurt you." "Hurt me?" Her voice caught. "You risked your life for mine." By now, 2 paramedics had arrived. One guided Alexis gently to the curb. The other checked Jake's arm. He tried to wave them off, but Lily tugged his sleeve. "Let them look, Daddy." Alexis sat silently for a long beat. then stood up again and walked toward them, heels crunching glass. Wait. Jake turned. What's your name, she asked. He hesitated. Jake. Jake what, Carter? Alexis nodded slowly, memorizing him. Jake Carter. I owe you my life. He offered a polite smile. Nah, just your morning coffee. Now, if you'll excuse us. He turned to go, taking Lily's hand. They disappeared into the crowd before the press could descend. That night, Alexis Monroe sat alone in her penthouse replaying the footage someone posted online. The video had already gone viral. The way he moved without hesitation, the calm urgency in his voice, the little girl who ran to his side and called him daddy. Alexis wasn't easily shaken, but something about Jake Carter rattled her. Not the act of saving her, but the way he looked at her like she was just another person. She sipped her wine, heart pounding. Jake Carter, she whispered to the quiet room. Who are you, and why did she already miss him? The morning headlines were relentless. Mystery man saves billionaire. CEO from Runaway truck who is the hero. Dad who vanished after the rescue. Alexis Monroe nearly killed, saved by blue-collar stranger by 7:00 a.m. The footage had racked up over 5 million views. Talk shows dissected the video frame by frame. Analysts commented on the raw masculinity and grace under pressure of the unknown man. Some compared him to a real-life superhero. Others speculated, was it staged, a PR stunt? Only Alexis Monroe knew the truth, and she couldn't stop thinking about him. She sat in the back seat of her Bentley, barely listening, as her assistant Corinne droned on about the day's meetings. We pushed the investor call to Monday, and PR wants to know if you consider releasing a statement. Forget the statement, Alexis interrupted. Did you find him? Corinne paused. You mean the mechanic? I don't know what he is, Alexis said, her voice taut. That's why I need you to find him. Jake Carter. His daughter's name is Lily. He lives somewhere near East 9th. I want to know everything. Where he works, where he lives, and why someone like him walked away like none of it mattered. Corinne blinked. Yes, ma'am. Alexis turned to the window, her reflection, staring back, composed, elegant, controlled. But inside, something was unraveling. Across town, in the cluttered back room of a humble auto garage, Jake Carter wiped his hands on a rag and exhaled. He'd already turned down 3 reporters, ignored 15 phone calls, and unplugged the garage's landline entirely. One of the reporters had even shown up in person with a bouquet of flowers and a camera crew. He'd sent her away with a deadpan glare and an oil-slicked wrench in hand. Lily sat on a worn stool in the corner, drawing stars in her notebook. Jake glanced at her. You okay, Peanut? She nodded. Is that lady okay? The one you saved? Jake paused, then nodded. She's fine. Rich people bounce back fast. Lily frowned. You don't like rich people. He leaned against the workbench. I don't dislike anyone, Lil. I just don't trust people who hide behind glass towers and think they're untouchable. But she didn't look mean? No, she didn't. That night, Alexis went through 6 different reports before she found the lead she needed. A license plate from a security camera near the crash. One partial frame captured Jake and Lily walking away from the scene. A second camera, 2 blocks down, caught them entering a small side street. A bit of software enhancement and license plate tracing later, and the mystery man had a name, address, and a work location. Carter's Auto and Salvage, Brooklyn. She leaned back, victorious. Corinne on the other end of the call hesitated. Should I set up a meeting? No, Alexis said slowly. He won't come if he thinks it's business. I'll go myself. The next morning, Jake was under a 1997 Buick with half the undercarriage rusted through when he heard the heels. He always knew when someone didn't belong. It wasn't just the sound, it was the energy. Like the world had shifted, tilted just slightly. He rolled out from under the car and sat up. And there she was. Alexis Monroe stood in the middle of the garage in a navy trench coat and sunglasses, her presence as jarring and radiant as a chandelier in a dive bar. Even the other mechanics stopped and stared. Jake wiped his hands and stood. You're a long way from Wall Street. Alexis pulled off her sunglasses. You're a hard man to find, Mr. Carter. Jake nodded toward the exit. That your car out front must be lost. I came to say thank you. Properly. You already did. Now you can go. She blinked, momentarily thrown. Is this how you treat everyone who tries to express gratitude? Jake gave a half shrug. Usually people like you don't stick around after the news cycle moves on. But here you are. Still curious, huh? Alexis took a slow breath. Yes, I am curious. About why you saved me without knowing who I was. About why you walked away. About how someone with hands like yours knew exactly how to tackle and shield without hesitation. Jake's jaw tightened. Maybe I just got lucky. No, that was training. Military first responder. He said nothing. Alexis stepped closer. You're hiding something, something noble. And I want to know what it is. Jake looked her straight in the eye. What I'm not, Miss Monroe, is a project, Alexis faltered. That's not. Jake cut her off. You want a headline or a redemption story for your shareholders, you can find a dozen other sob stories. But I'm not for sale. Not my past. Not my daughter. Not my life. The room went quiet. One of the mechanics whistled low under his breath. Alexis stood there stunned. And yet, oddly impressed. She adjusted her coat chin slightly raised. I'll be in touch. Jake called after her as she turned. Don't bother. Outside, Alexis stood by her car, one hand on the door, heart pounding. It wasn't anger she felt. It was respect. No one had ever spoken to her like that, certainly not someone with nothing to gain. Jake Carter wasn't just a man with a heroic moment. He was a fortress of something forgotten. And for the first time in years, Alexis Monroe wanted in, not for business, not for publicity, but because he reminded her of the one thing money couldn't buy. Honor. Jake Carter was used to being invisible. He liked it that way, liked the simplicity, the silence of not being noticed. People didn't ask questions if you kept your head down. They didn't offer pity or worse, charity. But after the stunt on East 9th, quiet was a luxury he could no longer afford. Even in the garage, customers came not for oil changes, but for a glimpse of the hero mechanic, the man who saved the billionaire. He didn't talk to reporters. He didn't answer questions. He just worked until he heard the purr of a very, very expensive engine. It was sleek silver and painfully out of place among rusted pickups and second-hand sedans. Jake looked up, hands black with grease, and sighed. You've got to be kidding me. The gull-wing door of the electric luxury coupe opened slowly, intentionally, dramatically, and Alexis Monroe stepped out dressed not for the boardroom, but in a simple blouse and dark jeans. Her heels were gone. So was her entourage. Just her. And a car that probably cost more than his entire garage. Jake leaned against the open hood of a Jeep. Didn't expect to see you slumming it twice in 1 week. Alexis offered a calm smile. I figured if I was going to be publicly humbled by a man, I might as well be properly introduced. You already know my name, but not your story. He wiped his hands and gestured toward the car. What's the issue? Battery breaks. No issue. She walked closer, eyes scanning the tools, the shelves, the quiet order of the space. I just needed an excuse. Jake raised an eyebrow. You're telling me you drove a $200,000 car into Brooklyn to fake a repair? She gave a small shrug. It worked. Behind him, Lily peeked around the garage door, clutching her sketchbook. Her eyes lit up when she saw Alexis. Jake turned. Lil, this is Miss Monroe. I remember. Lily beamed, then turned to Jake. Daddy, she's really pretty. Jake cleared his throat, flustered. Alexis knelt down to Lily's eye level. And you must be the bravest girl in New York. Lily giggled. Daddy says I'm the reason he doesn't give up. Jake's expression softened. That's true. Alexis stood, brushing off her jeans. Listen, I know this is forward, but I'd like to buy you both dinner. Jake shook his head. We're not a charity case. This isn't charity, she said, eyes unwavering. It's a thank you for saving my life, for disappearing before I could even say more than 2 words. Dinner with a billionaire, he muttered. That's subtle. It's a diner. Around the corner, booths, milkshakes, paper menus. No paparazzi, no PR. Just a table and a thank you. Lily tugged Jake's sleeve. Can we, Daddy, please? He looked at her, at the hope in her eyes, then sighed. All right, but I'm not changing clothes. The diner was nearly empty, the kind of place where the booth stuck to your jeans, and the waitress knew everyone's order before they sat down. Jake slid into the booth across from Alexis. Lily nestled beside him. The waitress blinked at Alexis in surprise, but said nothing, just took their orders and vanished. For a few minutes it was awkward. Alexis stirred her iced tea. Jake stared at the menu he wasn't going to read, and Lily colored in her sketchbook. Finally, Alexis broke the silence. So, Lily, What do you want to be when you grow up? A rocket designer, she said proudly. Like Daddy used to be. Jake froze. Alexis looked at him. Is that true? Jake exhaled. I was an aerospace engineer. Once? A long time ago. Why the change? He shrugged. Things happened. People got hurt. I walked away. But saving me, you didn't walk away from that, reflex, he muttered. Doesn't mean I want a life back in that world. Lily looked up. Daddy used to work on real planes. But then Mommy, she trailed off, eyes darkening. Jake placed a gentle hand over hers. Hey, it's okay. Alexis felt something in her chest tighten. You don't have to tell me, she said softly. Jake's jaw worked for a moment, as if weighing the silence. Then she was a flight attendant. There was a malfunction one I'd warned the company about. They didn't listen. The plane went down. She didn't come home. Alexis sat still stunned. I'm so sorry. He nodded once. I tried to bring the truth to light, got blacklisted. So I left. Started over, in a garage, in peace. A silence fell again. Not uncomfortable, just full. Then Lily brightened. Want to see my drawing? Alexis smiled. I'd love to. She slid the notebook over. A pencil sketch of Jake holding her hand in front of a rocket ship. The caption read, My daddy is a real hero. Alexis blinked back tears. It's beautiful. Jake rubbed the back of his neck. She's got her mom's heart. Outside, the evening air was cool. Alexis walked them back toward the garage, the city lights flickering behind them. I meant what I said earlier, she said. You're not just a good man, Jake. You're a great one. Jake kept his eyes forward. Don't put me on a pedestal. I'll only disappoint you. I don't believe that. They reached the corner. Alexis hesitated. This was the best dinner I've had in years, she said quietly. Jake gave a small, tired smile. Then you need to eat in better places, she laughed. Maybe I just need to eat with better people. A beat passed. Then she knelt beside Lily. Thank you for letting me borrow your dad for dinner. Lily hugged her without hesitation. You can borrow him again. Just bring milkshakes next time. Jake's breath caught. Alexis looked up at him. Good night, Jake. He nodded. Good night, Alexis. She walked away, disappearing into the city haze. Jake stood still, heart beating a little faster than it should have. He wasn't sure what just happened, but for the first time in a very long time, he didn't want to disappear. Jake Carter didn't belong in places with chandeliers. Yet here he was standing in the entrance of a quiet restaurant tucked between two glass towers in Midtown, holding the hand of his daughter like an anchor. The soft clink of silverware, the scent of rosemary and seared meat, the muted jazz floating in the air, it all pressed against his ribs like a weight he hadn't felt in years. Daddy, are we supposed to be here? Lily whispered, eyes wide as she stared at the polished marble floors. Jake leaned down. Probably not. They were both dressed the best they could manage. Jake had swapped his grease-stained jacket for a flannel shirt with the least frayed collar. Lily wore her school shoes and a sundress she'd outgrown last fall. Her hair was in two messy braids she'd insisted on doing herself. And then Alexis Monroe appeared casually radiant in a soft cream sweater and slacks, no diamonds, no entourage, no pretenses. I'm glad you came, she said genuinely. Jake nodded stiffly. Place is fancy. Don't worry. They let me in all the time. The hostess, eyes flicking between Alexis and Jake's attire, hesitated, then recognized Alexis's face and snapped into professional mode. They were led to a booth near the window overlooking the city. Candles glowed in the glass. It was quiet, intimate, deliberately private. Jake pulled Lily's chair out and sat beside her. His jaw was tight, arms crossed as if bracing for judgment. Alexis noticed. You hate this, she said softly. He didn't answer. I didn't bring you here to impress you, she added. I just thought, maybe it was time I shared my world. You shared yours. Jake glanced around. I'm not sure this is your world either. Seems like a performance. Alexis blinked. How so? He leaned in. You took off your heels. You wore jeans. You sat on the curb with us outside a diner. You weren't playing CEO. You were just you. This feels like armor again. She was quiet for a moment. Then maybe I'm still learning which version of me is real. Before Jake could respond, the waiter arrived. Alexis ordered simply grilled salmon asparagus. Jake squinted at the menu and said, burger, medium, fries, whatever soda comes with it. Lily picked macaroni and cheese with a grin. I don't eat foam or flowers, Jake muttered after the waiter left. And I've never trusted a place where the portion size needs a microscope? Alexis laughed. Noted. There was a pause, then Jake asked, why are you doing this? Alexis, really? She sipped her water. Because you saved me. Because most people want something from me, and you didn't. Jake shook his head. People don't do this kind of thing for a stranger, unless they want to make them not a stranger. Alexis set her glass down. All right, honesty for honesty. She looked at Lily, then lowered her voice slightly. I haven't felt safe in a very long time. Not just physically, emotionally. I spend every day surrounded by people who are either trying to impress me, manipulate me, or replace me. And then you came along. You didn't care who I was. You just acted. You saw danger and you ran toward it for someone you didn't know. Jake stayed silent, listening. That night she continued. I lay awake thinking, what kind of man does that? Not just out of instinct, but without ego, without calculation. Just goodness. Lily looked up. That's just my dad. Jake chuckled, brushing her bangs from her eyes. Let's not set the bar too high, kiddo. But it's true, she said proudly. He helps everyone, even if they're mean. One time this guy yelled at him in the parking lot, and Daddy still fixed his tire. Alexis tilted her head. That doesn't surprise me. Jake leaned back, sighing. I've made mistakes too. Don't paint me noble just because I got one thing right. Maybe it's not about getting everything right, Alexis said. Maybe it's about not running from the things that matter. The food arrived. Conversation slowed, became easier, lighter. They talked about Lily's school, Jake's favorite cars, Alexis's weirdest business meetings. Jake even admitted to once blowing up a microwave trying to solder a broken toaster. Lily found that hilarious. As they ate, Alexis looked between them and saw something she hadn't realized. She missed a table filled with laughter, not tension. A meal that meant connection, not convenience. And then just as Jake was reaching for the check, Alexis beat him to it. He glared. Don't. Too late. I told you I didn't come here to make you feel like less Jake, she said firmly. But sometimes accepting kindness is as brave as giving it. That silenced him. Silenced. Outside, they stepped into the cool night air. The city buzzed around them, taxis honking, lights blinking, life moving fast. But the three of them stood still under a flickering lamppost. Alexis handed Lily a small paper bag. There's a slice of chocolate cake in there. Midnight emergency rations. Lily beamed. You're the best. Jake looked at Alexis. You didn't have to do any of this. I know. He hesitated, then voice low. You're not what I expected. Neither are you. A cab pulled up for Alexis. She paused at the open door, looked at Jake one last time. Her voice was soft. I don't know what this is, Jake, but I'd like to find out, if you'll let me. Jake held her gaze for a long moment. I'll think about it, he said. She smiled. That's more than I hoped for. Then she stepped into the car and was gone. Jake stood there in the dark with Lily, the bag of cake in her hand, the echo of something new lingering in his chest. For a man who'd sworn off second chances, this one didn't feel so impossible. The storm rolled in unexpectedly that morning, low-hanging clouds turning the sky a sullen gray. Rain tapped steadily on the garage windows, washing the city streets in slick reflections. Jake stood alone beneath the half-raised hood of an old Ford, sleeves pushed up, brow furrowed as he adjusted the serpentine belt. He didn't hear the door open over the hum of the radio and the rattle of tools. Jake Carter came the familiar voice, warm yet edged with purpose. He straightened slowly. Alexis Monroe stood just inside a navy raincoat draped over her shoulders, an envelope tucked under one arm. No makeup this time. Just her. Understated, intense. You again, Jake said, wiping his hands. If this keeps up, people will think I work for you. I'm hoping you will, she said, holding out the envelope. He didn't take it. What is it? A formal offer, she said. Consulting, engineering review, 6-month contract, flexible hours, remote if you want. You'd have access to every resource you could ask for cutting-edge development in electric propulsion. We're launching a new division. Jake didn't move. It's not a favor, she added. I've read your old patents. The work you did on thermal shielding your designs were years ahead of their time. He looked down at his grease-stained hands. That was a lifetime ago. Then maybe it's time to reclaim it. Jake exhaled. You know what happens to people like me in companies like yours? You mean people with morals? No, he said quietly. People with scars. She stepped closer. Everyone at the top is either hiding one or carrying one. I'd rather work with someone who already survived his. Still, he hesitated. She softened. Jake, this isn't about saving me anymore. This is about building something again. For you, not for headlines. Jake stared at the envelope, heart drumming in his chest. I swore I was done, he said. After the crash, after what they covered up? She nodded. I know what happened. I found the flight reports, the warnings you filed. I even found the whistleblower memo. It's buried under legal threats and redacted names, but the initials matched. Jake froze. No one had ever connected the dots, not even the lawyers. I had my team verify everything, she continued. What they did, it wasn't just negligence. It was a cover-up. Jake's hands clenched into fists. And you want me to just waltz back into that world like nothing ever happened? No, Alexis said. I want you to change it. Later that afternoon, Jake stood behind the closed door of the garage's office envelope, untouched on the desk, watching Lily do her homework. She was humming softly to herself, legs swinging beneath the chair. He remembered when she was barely old enough to walk, gripping her mother's hand at the airport, waving goodbye, as Jake boarded a plane for a conference in Seattle. The last time they were all together before everything fell apart. Daddy Jake blinked. Are you okay? Lily asked, looking up. You're staring. He smiled faintly. Just thinking. About the lady, he chuckled. Yeah, about the lady. She likes you. Jake arched a brow. Oh, she looks at you like the way I look at brownies. He burst out laughing. That's quite a compliment. She's nice and smart, but I think she's lonely. Lily paused. Like you. Jake sat down across from her, sobering. You think I'm lonely sometimes, she said. You smile, but your eyes don't always smile. Jake swallowed hard. The honesty of children could crack through the thickest armor. Ms. Monroe offered me a job, he admitted. Lily perked up. Really, like, engineering job? He nodded. Are you going to take it? I don't know yet. It's complicated. She tilted her head. Would Mommy want you to? That stopped him cold. Would she? Jake looked out the rain-fogged window, heart twisting. Anna had always believed in him, even when he didn't. She used to call him her dream mechanic, not because he fixed machines, but because he built solutions no one else could see. Maybe Alexis was right. Maybe it was time to stop hiding in the wreckage. That evening, Jake walked through a modest park near his neighborhood envelope, still sealed in his jacket pocket. And there she was, Alexis Monroe, sitting alone on a bench beneath a metal awning, reading a paperback. No driver, no assistance, just her soaked hair curling at the edges. He approached slowly. I haven't said yes, he began. She closed the book without surprise. But you're here. I read your offer, he said. The contract's generous. The work sounds meaningful. But Jake inhaled. You want a man who can help you innovate, fix systems, break barriers. But I'm still trying to figure out if I'm the kind of man who can walk back into that world without losing myself again. I don't want a savior, Jake, she said. I want a partner, someone who's not afraid to tell the truth, even if it costs him everything. He studied her face, calm, resolute, sincere. She wasn't the girl behind the limo glass anymore. She was a woman standing in the rain asking for trust. All right, he said at last. I'll come in. Part-time, no suits, and I work from the garage. Alexis smiled. Deal. He turned to walk away, but she called after him. Jake. He looked back. I'm glad you didn't disappear again. He gave a soft, tired smile. Me too. The hangar was nothing like Jake remembered. It was cleaner now, sleek glass offices, polished floors, automated entry gates. But the air still carried that familiar scent of metal oil and pressure, the kind of pressure that once made him dream big and later walk away from it all. Jake stood at the threshold of Monroe Innovations' new R&D hub, wearing his usual jeans and work jacket, a visitor badge clipped to his collar. No one greeted him like a hero here. Just another name on a clipboard. That suited him fine. Inside, engineers bustled behind reinforced glass walls, running simulations, arguing over schematics. On one screen, a three-dimensional model of a new electric propulsion engine pulsed and rotated. Jake's eyes scanned it instinctively, his mind still fluent in the language of torque curves and heat coefficients. "You see it, don't you?" a voice said beside him. Alexis. She walked up in a simple blazer and ponytail, holding a coffee in one hand and a tablet in the other. She didn't look like a billionaire today, just someone chasing something worth believing in. Jake nodded toward the screen. "Your team's close, but the heat sink's undercalibrated. If they scale the prototype as is, it'll destabilize at 75% capacity." Alexis raised an eyebrow. "Think you can fix it?" "I know I can." She smiled. "Follow me." In a conference room on the second floor, Alexis tapped a button, dimming the lights. A familiar diagram filled the central screen: Phoenix X Electric Propulsion System. "This is the first of 3 hybrid engines we're building," she explained. "Fully electric startup with high-efficiency combustion assist during altitude gain. Goal is to replace short-haul jet engines within 5 years." Jake whistled low. "Ambitious and dangerous if done wrong," she added. "Which is why I want your oversight on every phase. You'll review schematics, identify structural and thermal faults, and train the younger team. They're good, but they've never built for life or death stakes." Jake's face darkened. Neither did the guys I used to work with, until it was too late. Alexis sat down across from him. "Tell me what happened, Jake. I've read the documents, the reports, but I want to hear it from you." He hesitated. Then he spoke. "I was part of the Vega 7 project, aerospace firm in Seattle. We were designing a lightweight regional jet, fast, efficient, but during testing I noticed heat signatures in the aft section during high-torque climbs. I flagged it, sent memos, multiple times." His voice grew rough. "They told me it was within tolerance. They pushed it through anyway. 10 months later, Flight 326 went down. 32 people died. One of them was my wife." Alexis said nothing. She didn't interrupt. She let the silence carry the weight of his grief. Jake stared at his hands. "I couldn't fix the past, so I walked away from the future." Alexis leaned forward. "You didn't fail, Jake. They did. You were the only one who stood up. And now, you're the only one I trust to make sure we don't repeat their mistakes." Jake looked up, eyes sharp again. "Then we do it right. No corners cut. No compromises." "Agreed." They shook hands. Not like business people, like comrades. Over the next week, Jake embedded himself in the project, not in suits or polished offices, but in the engine room blueprints, scattered sleeves rolled up. The younger engineers were skeptical at first. They whispered about the guy from the garage. But when Jake rewired a faulty circuit on the spot and recalculated the entire engine's airflow ratio by hand, skepticism gave way to awe. He became their North Star. Meanwhile, Alexis watched from the glass above, proud but cautious. Jake was thriving, but the past still hovered quiet, unresolved. So she went digging. 3 nights later, Alexis sat alone in her penthouse office. Moonlight filtered across the floor as she pulled up a confidential file. Linden Aerospace Internal Investigation. Vega 7 Program Restricted. Sealed. Only accessible through a contact she knew in aviation compliance. She scrolled past pages of jargon until a name caught her breath. Failure warnings submitted by Carter Jacob. Below it, a second document. Memo suppression authorized by Carson Blake, VP Engineering. She leaned back slowly. Carson Blake, a man who now happened to be a senior partner at Stratwell Dynamics, one of Monroe's largest defense contractors. Her jaw tightened. The next morning, Jake arrived at the garage just after dawn. Lily was asleep on the couch, a book still open on her chest. He covered her gently with a blanket and turned on the shop lights. The phone buzzed. Unknown number. He picked up. "Jake, it's Alexis. I need you to see something. Privately." Jake's gut clenched. What is it? A name from your past? Someone who made sure the world never heard the truth. They met at a small corner cafe far from cameras and boardrooms. Alexis slid her phone across the table. Jake stared at the screen. Blake's face, still smug, still powerful. He buried the report, Alexis said. I have proof. Legal red tape won't help, but public pressure might. Jake shook his head. I didn't come back to start a war. No, she agreed. You came back to build something better. But the rot at the top doesn't just go away unless someone pulls it into the light. Jake's hands trembled slightly. He stole more than my career, he said. He stole my daughter's mother, and never paid for it. Alexis looked at him, her voice low. So what are we going to do about it? Jake met her eyes. Everything they never expected. Jake Carter hadn't planned on walking into a war, but by morning he was standing at the edge of a battlefield. It wasn't the kind with bullets or bombs. It was sharper, cleaner. It wore suits and smiles and used stock prices as weapons. And now he was about to take his first swing not out of vengeance, but out of something far more dangerous: conviction. Alexis had already set things in motion. A private briefing had been scheduled for noon at Monroe Tower, not with shareholders or board members, but with an independent panel of engineers, ethicists, and regulators. People who actually understood what had happened with the Vega 7 program. She was betting everything on credibility, transparency, and cold hard evidence. Jake had spent the night preparing, not polishing a speech, he wasn't that kind of man, but laying out technical records, internal memos, safety test simulations, all retrieved from the digital graveyard Alexis had unlocked. When she handed him her legal team's secured folder, he didn't even blink. He knew every line already. He'd lived them. Lily had asked him that morning, "Daddy, are you nervous?" No, Jake had replied, tugging on his jacket. "I'm ready." The conference room on the 47th floor of Monroe Tower overlooked the East River, a stunning, sterile cathedral of steel and glass. Inside, Alexis sat at the head of the long table, her face unreadable. Jake stood at her side, still in denim and canvas, holding nothing but truth in his calloused hands. Across from them sat 7 people experts in engineering, ethics, aviation, safety, and aerospace law. Beside them, a notary and an official from the FAA's Internal Compliance Division. Alexis opened the meeting. "Thank you all for coming. You were invited here today not for a press event or a corporate spin cycle, but for the truth. What you're about to see will confirm that one of our country's largest aerospace disasters wasn't just an accident. It was the result of willful negligence buried by corporate greed. And this man, Jake Carter, was the only one who tried to stop it." Jake stepped forward, voice calm but razor sharp. "I'm not a public speaker. I don't have a PR team. What I do have are facts and memories that won't stop keeping me up at night." He walked them through the timeline, the safety memos, the altered reports, the ignored warnings, and then he pulled out the smoking gun, an original internal memo digitally signed between Carson Blake and 3 other senior execs from Linden Aerospace. Jake read it aloud. "Carter's heat signature analysis is credible, but if we delay rollout, Stratwell Dynamics pulls funding. Suppress and proceed." The room fell into a stunned, heavy silence. One of the engineers, a former NASA consultant, leaned forward. "You wrote this analysis how long before the crash?" 73 days, Jake replied. Another asked, "And you were terminated?" Jake nodded. "My badge deactivated, my email erased, the week after the plane went down." Outside, the clouds thickened, but inside that room, clarity broke like lightning. The FAA representative stood. "Mr. Carter, I'd like you to submit a full affidavit. We'll be reopening the investigation into Vega 7 immediately. And this time, we're not taking it to the company's lawyers. We're taking it to the Department of Transportation." Jake didn't speak. He just nodded. Alexis, watching the panel rise and gather their files, felt a slow exhale escape her lungs. It was done. The truth was no longer buried. Later that evening, Jake and Alexis stood on the rooftop of Monroe Tower, a quiet breeze pushing against the skyline. "I thought I'd feel lighter," Jake said, hands in his pockets. "You don't, I feel hollow. Like I've been holding something for so long that now that it's gone, I don't know how to stand straight." Alexis handed him a flask, just coffee, and sat on the low ledge. "That's what justice feels like at first. Not like fireworks. More like air coming back into your lungs after years underwater." He took a sip. "What happens now, they'll investigate. Press will follow. Blake's going to be named. So will the others. Some will settle. Some will fall hard." Jake nodded. He'll lawyer up. He already has, she said. He called our legal team this morning, said he was shocked by your allegations. Jake smirked darkly. Of course he did. Alexis hesitated. He also made a threat. Said if we don't drop this quietly, Stratwell Dynamics pulls out of our propulsion division. Jake looked at her sharply. That project's your future. Your whole next-gen engine platform. I know. And you're still pushing this forward? She looked him dead in the eye. Jake, I've spent years building companies, winning markets, outmaneuvering enemies. But I've never once been as certain of something as I was when I heard you say you wouldn't let this go. He blinked, surprised by her intensity. So no, she added, voice steady. We're not dropping anything. There was silence between them, then not tense, not awkward, just charged. Jake took a step closer. You're risking a lot. So are you, she said. But maybe we're not doing it alone anymore. Down on the street, news vans were already circling Monroe Tower. The story was breaking, headlines forming, and somewhere across the city, Carson Blake was probably smashing something expensive. Jake didn't care. He looked at Alexis again. She looked back. No walls, no games. Just a man and a woman standing at the edge of something vast. Not war, possibility. The garage was quiet that morning. Jake liked it that way, just the ticking of cooling engines, the scent of motor oil, and the soft, steady rhythm of tools returning to their rightful place. It was his temple, his reset button. And today, more than ever, he needed grounding. The headlines were everywhere now. Hero engineer blows whistle on Vega 7. Disaster Department of Transportation reopens, case after 8 years. Monroe's CEO supports bombshell testimony. Stock slides 3%, but Jake had turned off the TV. He didn't want to hear himself called hero. He wasn't in it for redemption. What he wanted was peace. Instead, he found a visitor waiting by the garage door. A boy, 17, maybe 18, skinny, nervous. A duffel bag slung over one shoulder and grime on his shoes that told a story longer than Jake needed to hear. Jake nodded to him. You lost, the kid hesitated. You fix engines. Jake chuckled, wiping his hands. That's what the sign says. I saw the video, the one where you talked about standing up to that company. Jake's posture tensed slightly. That's so. The kid stepped forward, voice barely steady. My dad worked baggage on Flight 326. He was on that plane. A silence hung heavy in the air. Jake didn't move. I just wanted to say, the kid faltered, eyes glassy. I always thought nobody cared what happened to those people. Nobody ever fought for them. Until I saw you. Jake's throat tightened. He wasn't ready for this. He hadn't prepared for gratitude he didn't know how to carry. You got a name, he asked. Javi. Jake looked him over. You know anything about torque converters? The kid blinked. No. Want to learn? A slow, hesitant smile broke across Javi's face. Yeah, I do. Jake handed him a wrench. That was how healing began, not in courtrooms, but in conversations. Not in revenge, but in purpose. Later that week, Alexis returned to the garage with Lily in tow, both holding ice cream cones. It had become their routine now, Friday visits after school, where the air was thick with stories and grease and something far more precious, normalcy. Lily raced to her corner table with a new drawing. Alexis, meanwhile, watched Jake from a few feet away as he guided Javi through disassembling a carburetor. There was something magnetic about Jake when he taught. His voice was steady, his movements patient, his focus absolute. No ego, no condescension, just a man passing on what he knew like it mattered. Alexis smiled. I'm opening a second R&D facility in Connecticut, she said once Jake finished. Clean energy, mixed discipline. I want to make it a place where kids like Javi can train, build, belong. Jake looked up. That's ambitious. I'm modeling it after you, she said simply. The world needs more places like this. She gestured around the garage. Less polish, more heart. Jake wiped his hands. You're giving me too much credit. No, she replied. I'm giving you exactly what you deserve. There was a pause. I want you to help design the program, she added, and not as a side project. I want you full-time. Jake blinked. You want me to walk away from this, not walk away? Grow it. We'll keep the garage open. Use it as a live learning lab. Apprentice rotation, paid training, real impact. He leaned against the workbench. You're serious. Dead serious. Why me? Because when the cameras leave and the headlines fade, she said you're still the man who looks a kid in the eye and hands him a wrench. That's worth more than anything I could ever pay for. Jake studied her. She wasn't selling a dream, she was offering a legacy. You really believe I'm that man? I don't have to believe it, Alexis said softly. I've seen it. That night, Jake and Lily sat on the front step of their small house, watching the stars fight through the haze of city light. You okay, Daddy? Lily asked, scooting closer. Jake nodded. Just thinking. About her, he chuckled. Always. She's pretty, Lily said with a giggle. Jake raised a brow. You think that's what I'm thinking about? Lily looked up at him, earnest. No, I think you're thinking about if you can trust her. Jake looked back at the stars. You're getting too smart. I get it from Mommy, she said proudly. Jake smiled. Lily, he said after a pause, what if we could help more people? What if this garage wasn't just our place, but a place where people find their way again? Like Javi. Exactly like Javi. Lily leaned her head on his arm. Then I think Mommy would be proud of you. Jake swallowed hard, the lump in his throat too real, too familiar. He kissed the top of her head. Then maybe it's time. The next morning, Jake showed up at Monroe Tower, not in work boots, not in grease, but in his best shirt, and the resolve of a man who had made peace with his ghosts. Alexis was waiting on the rooftop helipad when, whipping her hair, city spread out behind her like a canvas. He held out his hand. I'm in. Her smile lit up more than the skyline. Let's build something that outlives both of us, she said. Jake nodded, but no suits. No suits, she agreed. And we start with the kids no one's looking at. That's where all great revolutions begin. They shook on it. And somewhere far below in a quiet corner of Brooklyn, a garage light flickered back on its door. Open its future, unwritten, its heart finally full. The sky was clear, but the storm was already building. Monroe Media stock had dipped 2 points after Alexis publicly backed Jake's testimony. Most CEOs would have pivoted, softened their language, pulled back behind a velvet curtain of legal counsel and corporate speak. Alexis Monroe had done the opposite. She doubled down, appearing on 60 Minutes, speaking at the National Aviation Ethics Forum, even walking into the Department of Transportation with Jake by her side. The woman who'd once commanded boardrooms in designer heels now stood in her flats next to a mechanic in a canvas jacket. And suddenly everything felt different and dangerous. It began with whispers. Then came the editorials. Is Monroe Media risking its future for a fallen engineer? Wall Street shudders at CEO's reckless loyalty, boardroom drama, or billion-dollar meltdown. And then on a cold Thursday morning, it arrived in full, a formal letter from Monroe Media's board of directors demanding Alexis recuse herself from all strategic decisions pending an internal review. The letter cited reputational risk, potential liabilities, and questionable personal entanglements. In other words, Jake. Jake read the letter in stunned silence in Alexis's office as she poured herself a cup of tea with deliberate calm. This isn't legal, he said, scanning it again. No, Alexis replied, but it's calculated. They're punishing you for standing by me. They're punishing me, she said evenly, for stepping outside the role they expect of me, clean, composed, obedient. I broke their favorite rule. Jake arched a brow, which is don't care about people more than profits. Jake leaned forward, then fight them. Call a press conference. Bring out the documents, the engineers, the families. Alexis shook her head. That's their playbook. Explosions, lawsuits, deflections. I'm not playing that game. Jake sat back exasperated. Then what are you going to do? She looked up at him. I'm going to give them the only thing they've never had. What a mirror. That afternoon, Alexis summoned the board to a closed-door meeting. No cameras, no recordings. Just 12 executives who believed they ran the empire, and one woman who'd built it from the ground up. Jake waited outside the glass-paneled room, flanked by Corinne and Lily, who was reading A Wrinkle in Time for the 3rd time that month. The receptionist offered him coffee. He declined. Inside, Alexis stood alone before the board. I've read your letter, she began, and I've come to offer my reply. She slid a thick folder across the table. Inside, you'll find 12 documented cases over the last decade where this company chose image over integrity, some of which I'm willing to bet you'd rather not see reach a courtroom. Several board members stiffened. Alexis continued, I've spent years building Monroe Media into a pillar of innovation. But this isn't about me. It's about the culture you've allowed to grow like mold behind the drywall. You say I'm reckless. I say I've finally found the courage to be honest. She paused. I stand by Jake Carter, not just because he saved my life, but because his life proves something we've all forgotten, that doing the right thing is never the wrong investment. A tense silence followed. Finally, the chairman spoke. Are you threatening us? No, Alexis replied calmly. I'm inviting you to choose. Reform with me or find yourselves trying to lead a company whose best minds will leave the moment I walk. She stood. I'm giving you 2 days, not out of courtesy, out of fairness. Then she left, head high, pulse steady. Downstairs, she stepped into the lobby and saw Jake leaning against the marble wall, arms folded. Lily looked up from her book. Well, Jake asked. Alexis shrugged. I just told a room full of billionaires that their arrogance is the reason people die. Jake chuckled. That'll go over well. I wasn't asking for applause. She looked up at him, then tired, raw, but clearer than he'd ever seen her. I'm not trying to win anymore, she said. I'm trying to matter. Jake reached into his jacket, pulled out a folded sheet of paper, and handed it to her. What's this? She asked. My first schematic for the training center. Drafted it last night. She unfolded it. Pencil lines sketched by hand. Labeled parts, ventilation paths, solar panel grids. It was beautiful in its simplicity. Functional, visionary. You still dream in blueprints, she whispered. Jake smiled. Only when I have something worth building. Their eyes locked. Neither spoke the words hanging in the air, but they didn't need to. Lily interrupted. Are you guys going to kiss or what? Jake burst out laughing. Alexis turned scarlet. Lily, what I read romance now, she said, flipping a page. It's always so obvious. That night, Monroe Tower's rooftop garden sat quiet beneath the stars. Jake and Alexis stood alone by the edge, the city glowing beneath them. They're going to come at you harder, he said. I know. You could lose everything. I already did, she replied softly. Before I met you. Jake took her hand. I don't want to be the reason your empire crumbles. Alexis turned to face him. Jake, you're the reason it means something now. And then finally she kissed him, nothing grand or rehearsed, just a quiet collision of trust and timing, and two people who had fought too long to keep the world out. When they broke apart, she whispered, let's see what the storm leaves standing. Jake nodded, and build from there. The media storm hit by morning. Cable news anchors led with it. Financial analysts called it a reckless pivot. Social media boiled with hashtags, some cheering Alexis Monroe as a visionary, others labeling her a liability. But the headlines didn't matter to Jake Carter. What mattered was the note she left behind. It had arrived at the garage on Friday evening, folded neatly inside a cream-colored envelope. No name, no seal. Just one handwritten sentence in Alexis's clean, steady script. This isn't about gratitude anymore, Jake. It never was. Jake sat at his workbench long after closing, rereading it like a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. He wasn't stupid. He'd seen the headlines. He knew she was under siege from all sides. And still, she stood by him. But now that truth had cleared the air, something heavier remained. Expectation, hope, maybe even love. And for a man who had built a life around not needing those things, felt dangerous. The next day, Jake didn't go to the tower. He didn't answer her texts either. Instead, he drove Lily out to their favorite spot, an abandoned overlook above the East River, where you could see the whole city humming quietly below. They brought sandwiches and sat on the hood of the truck. Lily watched him in silence. Finally, did something happen? Jake didn't respond right away. I think she feels something, Lily added more carefully. For you. Jake kept his eyes on the horizon. She's from a world I walked away from. She's not a world, Lily said. She's a person. Jake turned to her. It's not that simple. Yes, it is, Lily said, drawing a slow breath. When Mom died, I thought you'd never be happy again. I thought you were going to fix cars and sleep on the couch forever. But you smiled at her, Daddy. Really smiled. Like you forgot you weren't supposed to. He exhaled. She had no idea how much that landed. And she's not helping you out of pity, Lily added. She needs you just as much as you need her. Jake looked away. I'm not good at being needed. Then be loved instead. Jake blinked. 12 years old. And somehow she saw through all the armor. That night, Alexis was home alone for the first time in weeks. No meetings, no calls, no reporters banging on the building's glass. Just silence and regret. She didn't know if Jake had read the note. She didn't know if he was still angry or worse, retreating. What she did know was this: she missed him. Not the man who saved her. Not the engineer who helped her build a revolution. The man who looked at her like she wasn't Monroe the mogul, but simply Alexis. And she didn't want to go another night without saying it, so she grabbed her coat. Jake heard the knock just after 10. He almost didn't open it, but Lily peeked out the window first and said, "It's her." He hesitated, then pulled the door open. Alexis stood there in the chill hair, loose eyes brighter than he remembered. "I didn't think you'd come," he said. "I almost didn't," she replied. "Wasn't sure I had the right." "You've always had the right." There was a pause. Then Alexis stepped forward, her voice low and trembling. "Jake, I didn't choose you because you saved me. I chose you because you reminded me I'm still worth saving too." Jake looked at her, really looked at her. The woman who ran empires, who spoke to rooms filled with power, who stood toe-to-toe with men twice her age and told them no. But right now she looked human. And more than anything, she looked afraid. "I didn't want to be another person who needed something from you," she said. "I wanted to be someone you could lean on. Trust." Maybe even Jake took her hand. "You already are." She blinked. "You didn't pull me out of my past," he continued. "You made me want a future." Her lips parted, but she didn't speak. He closed the space between them, slowly, gently, and kissed her. Not like a man who owed her anything. Not like a mechanic who'd rescued a billionaire. But like someone who saw her, all of her, and still reached out anyway. Later, they sat together on the couch, Lily curled beside them, like it was the most natural thing in the world. The TV played quietly in the background, a news segment covering the launch of the Monroe Carter Initiative, the joint training center set to open in 6 months. A sanctuary for overlooked youth, a hub for sustainable tech and ethical engineering. Jake turned the volume down. "You still want to build that place?" Alexis asked, head resting on his shoulder. "Only if we build it together," he said. She smiled. "Even if the board fights us, let them." She kissed his cheek. Then Jake looked at her, really looked at her. "This isn't about favors anymore." "No," she agreed. "It's about us." The Monroe Carter Training Initiative launched on a drizzly Tuesday morning in April. It began not with a ribbon-cutting ceremony or a flashy press release, but with a classroom. A simple room with 4 worn tables, 2 whiteboards, and a banner hung crookedly on the back wall that read, "Build the world you want to live in." Jake Carter stood at the front of the room, sleeves rolled up, a blueprint spread across the table. Around him sat 7 students, some from city shelters, some from foster homes, some just looking for a second chance. Among them was Javi, the kid who had shown up at Jake's garage weeks ago with more questions than tools. And now he held a wrench like it meant something. Jake tapped the blueprint. "All right, first lesson: engines don't work because they're perfect. They work because each part knows its job and trusts the others to do theirs." One of the boys frowned. "You mean like teamwork?" Jake nodded. "I mean like life." Upstairs, Alexis paced the glass corridors of the center's administrative wing. Despite the media maelstrom surrounding her recent board confrontation, she was calm, clear. Her phone buzzed with updates from legal teams and investors, but today her mind was fixed on something else. She stepped into a conference room overlooking the open courtyard. Through the window, she saw Jake surrounded by students, laughing, nodding, teaching, like it was the air he breathed. Corinne entered behind her with a tablet. "You're going to want to see this." Alexis glanced at the screen. "Breaking Stratwell Dynamics. Cuts ties with Monroe Media. Amid ethics dispute, sources say the move was prompted by CEO Alexis Monroe's refusal to reverse support of controversial whistleblower Jake Carter." Alexis barely flinched. "Let them go," she said. "We don't need them." Corinne hesitated. "It's a big hit." Alexis turned to the window again. Then we'll rebuild. But this time we'll know exactly what we're building for. That evening, the garage was quiet again, though not for long. Lily helped Jake sort bolts by size as he cleaned up after another long day at the center. The place had become more than a shop. It was the heartbeat of a movement now. Alexis entered through the side door carrying a box of takeout and a stack of folders. Jake looked up and grinned. That smells dangerously like Chinese food. Extra dumplings. Your reward for surviving 3 teenage boys arguing over a brake caliper. He laughed. They'll figure it out. Eventually, she set the food down on his desk. I talked to the board today. Jake paused. And they're split. Half want me out, half are scared to lose me, and I told all of them the same thing, I'm not stepping down. He studied her carefully. You sure about that? I've never been sure of anything. And I realized something. She walked to him, placed her hand over his. I don't want to spend my life protecting a throne I don't believe in. I want to build something real, with you, with this. Jake looked at her for a long time. Then maybe it's time to stop looking back. She tilted her head, meaning he pulled a small worn envelope from his pocket. It had been in his wallet for years, unopened, unread. The final report from the crash investigation, the last piece of the past he hadn't let go of. I carried this for too long, he said, thinking I needed to punish myself, that I didn't deserve to move on. He handed it to her. I don't need it anymore. She took it gently, then tossed it in the nearby trash bin. Neither do I. Later that night, they walked through the city together. No headlines, no cameras, just streetlights, distant traffic, and the quiet comfort of shared steps. Jake glanced over. You know, I used to think I didn't belong in your world. Alexis smiled, slipping her hand into his. You didn't. He raised an eyebrow. Because my world wasn't real until you showed up. He laughed quietly, shaking his head. That sounds dangerously like a line. It's not. But if it were, would you fall for it? I already did. Back at the training center, the classroom lights flickered back on. Javi had stayed late working on a battery unit. He looked up as Jake and Alexis passed by the window. Jake knocked gently on the glass. Don't burn the place down. Javi grinned. No promises. Alexis looked up at Jake. He reminds me of someone. Jake nodded. Someone who thought he was done until he wasn't. And as they stood there in the hallway surrounded by second chances beneath walls filled with tools and hope and chalkboard dreams, they realized something profound. They weren't rebuilding the past. They were writing the future. Together. 1 year later, spring had returned to the city, not loud, not brash, but gentle. The kind of spring you almost miss unless you're paying attention. The kind where buds push through concrete cracks and sun seeps quietly into corners long left cold. At the edge of Brooklyn, where the Monroe Carter Training Center now stood proudly beneath a repainted warehouse roof, hope had become routine. Engines hummed, laughter echoed, and the scent of warm metal and fresh ambition filled the air. Jake Carter stood beneath the overhang outside the garage, sipping from a ceramic mug that read, I void warranties. His hands were stained again, just like always, but now they were stained with purpose. Inside, Javi was leading a group of new trainees through a battery teardown. His voice was stronger now, confident. The awkwardness had melted into assurance. He wore the navy blue Monroe Carter jacket like it meant something, because it did. Jake smiled to himself. A lot had changed in a year, but not the important things. That afternoon, the center hosted its first ever community open day. Families strolled through the renovated classrooms and converted hangars, watching demos, test drives, and the occasional small engine catching fire under a teen's proud grin. On a stage in the courtyard, Alexis took the mic. She looked radiant, not in makeup or jewels, but in the way someone looks when they've been through it and still chose light. The crowd hushed as she began. A year ago, she said, we stood on this very ground with nothing but a vision and a lot of duct tape. Today, we have 72 enrolled trainees, 3 working labs, and 2 kids who hacked our smart lock system so well, we offered them internships. Laughter rippled. But more than that, she continued, that we have a living reminder that the best things we build in this life are the people we believe in. She paused, looking across the crowd to where Jake stood near the fence, hands in his jacket pocket, smiling at her. I'd like to invite someone up here, she said. The man who started this with nothing but a wrench, a battered toolbox, and a heart bigger than any corporation I've ever worked with. Jake Carter. Applause broke out, followed by a cheer from Lily near the lemonade stand. Go, Dad. Jake took the stage, slowly rubbing the back of his neck, awkward in the spotlight. He took the mic but didn't speak at first. Just looked out over the courtyard at the kids, the families, the garage he once thought he'd die in alone. I don't really do speeches, he began, so I'll keep this simple. He glanced at Alexis, then out to the crowd. I've made engines my whole life. I've taken apart machines older than me and rebuilt them with my bare hands. But the hardest thing I ever had to rebuild was myself. The crowd quieted, and I didn't do it alone. I had help from my daughter who never let me give up, from a woman who looked past the grease and the guilt, and from a community that said, "We see you." His voice wavered just slightly. So if you're standing here today wondering if you've messed up too bad, fallen too far, or burned too many bridges, don't. Because what matters isn't what broke, it's what you choose to build next. Applause thundered. Alexis stepped up beside him, slipped her hand in his. Their eyes met, no stagecraft, no pretense, just truth. And the crowd saw it, not a headline. A home. That evening, after the guests had gone and the lights dimmed, Jake and Alexis walked through the now silent courtyard. The breeze carried the scent of motor oil, fried food, and possibility. Lily walked ahead of them, swinging her backpack, still humming a tune from earlier. She's growing fast, Alexis said. Jake nodded. I blinked and she started correcting my grammar. Alexis smiled. She loves you deeply. She's the best part of me. You've got a lot of good parts, she said softly. He looked at her. So do you. Even the ones with sharp edges. They stopped beneath the old oak tree by the parking lot, one Jake had insisted they keep when they cleared the land. It's not dead, he'd said. It's waiting. Now it was blooming. They sat beneath it, watching the lights flicker off one by one. Alexis leaned against his shoulder. Do you still think you don't belong in my world? Jake shook his head slowly. No. I think we made a new one. One where I could finally belong. She kissed his cheek. And where I never have to stand alone again. He wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. The night wrapped around them, warm and quiet. And somewhere in that shared silence, two lives, once broken by loss and burden, finally found peace in each other, in purpose, in the extraordinary miracle of a second chance. Because when kindness builds the bridge, love always finds the way across. Where are you watching from? We'd love to know. Drop your city or country in the comments below and say hi. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories just like this one. Your support helps us keep telling the kinds of stories that remind us what really matters. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, take care and stay kind.